The morning sun barely crept over the Colorado peaks when they hauled him out like damaged goods. Talon Walker, that wasn't the name his Nootka mother gave him, but it was the one white men could pronounce, sat propped against a wagon wheel, his useless legs stretched before him in the dirt. The trading post at Bent Creek wasn't much more than a collection of rough-hewn buildings squatting beside the mountain trail, but it drew every manner of drifter, prospector, and opportunist looking to make their fortune or lose what little they had. "Step right up, gentlemen," Marcus Henley's voice carried across the dusty yard. Marcus had ridden with Talon for 3 winters, shared campfires and close calls with Ute war parties. Now he stood there in his worn buckskins, gesturing at Talon like he was auctioning off a broken-down mule. "Got myself a genuine Nootka scout here. Best tracker between here and the Pacific coast, or was. Anyway." A few men wandered over, curious in that idle way of folks with nothing better to do. One spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Talon's boot. "What happened to him?" asked a prospector with ore dust still clinging to his beard. "Grizzly?" Marcus shrugged. "Caught him up near Wolverine Pass last spring. Tore up his back something fierce. Can't feel nothing below the waist now, but his mind's sharp as ever. Knows every trail, every water source, every Indian sign from here to California." Talon kept his face still as carved stone. He'd learned that from his mother's people, never let them see what cuts deepest. The shame burned worse than the old bear wounds that crisscrossed his back. 6 months ago, he could track a whisper through a windstorm. Now he couldn't even stand to relieve himself without help. "What's your asking price?" A thin man in a Denver suit stepped forward, calculating. "Might could use him at my trading operation. Set him up with a ledger. Let him draw maps." $20 gold. Marcus crossed his arms. Fair price for all that knowledge locked up in his head. $20 for half a man. The prospector laughed ugly. "I'd pay 20 for a good pack mule, and at least the mule can carry itself." The small crowd chuckled. Someone suggested they could prop him up in a saloon as entertainment. The crippled Indian scout. See him tell your fortune for a nickel. Another wondered aloud if his condition affected all his parts or just his legs, which brought more coarse laughter. Talon watched a hawk circle overhead, focusing on its lazy loops rather than the words pecking at what remained of his pride. He'd known this day would come when Marcus's charity ran out. Winter was approaching. Supplies were thin, and a man who couldn't pull his weight was just another mouth to feed. "I'll give you 15, final offer," the suited man said, "and that's being generous, considering the care he'll need." Marcus was already nodding when a clear voice cut through the negotiations. "I'll pay 40. Every head turned. A woman sat astride a bay mare at the edge of the crowd, and she wasn't like any woman most of them had seen. Willow Steel wore men's canvas pants tucked into tall boots, a leather coat that had seen better decades, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed sharp green eyes. A Winchester rode easy in her saddle scabbard, and the colt on her hip looked well used. $40 gold, she repeated, swinging down from her horse with economical grace. "Cash on the barrel." Marcus's eyes went wide with greed. "Well now, ma'am, that's a generous offer." "It's not an offer." Willow pulled a leather pouch from inside her coat, hefted it so the coins clinked. "It's what I'm paying, unless you'd rather I take my business elsewhere." No, 40's fine." Marcus reached for the pouch, but Willow pulled it back. "I'll see the goods first." She walked past the gawking men and crouched in front of Talon, studying him with the same careful attention she'd give a horse at auction. Her eyes took in the broadness of his shoulders, still powerful despite months of wasting, the premature silver threading through his black hair, the careful blankness of his dark eyes that couldn't quite hide the intelligence behind them. "You're Nootka." He nodded once. "From the coast or inland?" "Coast." His voice came out rusty from disuse. Cleoquot sound. "Long way from home." She tilted her head. "You speak English, Spanish too." "And French, some Chinook jargon." Most of the plains' tongues. Can you read right? A spark of the old pride flickered. Better than most white men. She smiled at that. Just a quick quirk of her lips. I don't doubt it. They say you know these mountains better than anyone. Did know them. He gestured at his useless legs. Not much good for scouting now. Maybe not, but that knowledge is still in your head. Isn't it? The trails, the passes, the places a person could hide or hunt or dig. Something in the way she said dig made him look at her more carefully. What's this about? Business. She stood, turned to Marcus. $40. You throw in his gear whatever he's got. Now wait a minute. The prospector interrupted. Some of us might want a bid. Willow's hand dropped casual-like to her pistol. This isn't an auction. It's a private transaction between Mr. Henley and myself. Anyone has a problem with that. We can discuss it. Her tone suggested such discussions would be brief and pointed. The prospector backed down, muttering. Marcus quickly gathered Talon's few possessions, a worn blanket, his knife, the medicine pouch his mother made him that he'd somehow kept through everything. The gold changed hands. Can you sit a horse? Willow asked Talon. If I'm tied on. That'll do. She whistled sharp, and a second horse appeared from behind the trading post, a steady-looking paint gelding already saddled. Boys, help him up. Nobody moved. The fun of mocking a crippled Indian was one thing. Actually touching him was another. Willow sighed, pulled her Colt, and examined it like she was checking for dust. I'm going to count to 3. By 2, the prospector and another man were hauling Talon up into the saddle. Willow produced a length of rope and efficiently secured his legs, checking the knots with practiced hands. Why? Talon asked quietly while she worked. What do you want with a broken scout? She looked up at him, and for just a moment, he saw something fierce and desperate flash in those green eyes. Maybe I need something that can't be bought with working legs. She patted the last knot into place. Maybe I need what's in your head more than what your body can do. And if I don't want to share it, then I've wasted $40 and you can crawl back to Marcus. She swung up onto her mare. But something tells me you've got more pride than that. She was right, and they both knew it. Talon gathered the reins with hands that still worked perfectly well. Where are we going? Up. She pointed toward the high country where the peaks disappeared into morning clouds. Got a place up there. Fair warning, it's a hard ride, and it'll get harder before it gets easier. Lady, he said, allowing himself a bitter smile. Everything's been hard since that bear took my legs. At least you're paying me for it. I'm not paying you yet. The 40 was to buy you free. What you earn from here depends on what you're willing to do. She clicked her tongue and the mare started forward. The paint followed, and Talon found himself leaving the trading post behind, bound for the high country with a woman who wore men's clothes and talked about needing what was in his head. Whatever her game was, it had to be better than being sold for $15 to keep ledgers or be saloon entertainment. Behind them, Marcus Henley counted his gold and tried not to think about the look in his old partner's eyes. The crowd dispersed, already forgetting about the crippled Indian and the strange woman who'd paid too much for him. By noon, when the mountain shadows grew short and sharp, someone else would provide distraction. But up on the climbing trail, where the air grew thin and cold, Willow Steele led her new acquisition higher into the peaks, and Talon Walker, who'd thought his useful days were behind him, began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this hard-eyed woman might prove him wrong. The paint horse picked its way steady and sure up the rocky path, and Talon let himself hope for the first time in 6 months. It was a dangerous feeling for a man in his position, but as the trading post disappeared into the valley below, he couldn't quite shake it. Whatever Willow Steele wanted with a paralyzed Nootka scout, it had to be worth more than $40 gold, and that meant maybe despite everything he still had some value after all. They rode for 2 hours before Willow Steele called a halt beside a creek that tumbled down through stands of aspen already turning gold. She dismounted, smooth as water, pulled a tin cup from her saddlebag, and filled it from the stream. Without asking, she brought it to Talon. "Drink." She held it steady while he took the cup. "We've got another 3 hours of climbing ahead. I can manage water myself." His pride prickled at being tended like an infant. "I'm sure you can." She didn't move the cup away. "But seeing as how I just spent $40 on you, I'd rather not watch you fall off that horse trying to prove something that doesn't need proving." He drank. The water was cold enough to hurt his teeth, sweet with mountain minerals. When he handed the cup back, she filled it again for herself. "You haven't asked my name," he said. "I know your name. Talon Walker, the Nootka who could track a ghost through a blizzard." She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Marcus Henley talks too much when he's drinking. As for the 3 months he's been trying to sell you to anyone who'd listen." 3 months. The words tasted bitter as old coffee. "Don't take it personal. Man like Marcus only sees dollar signs. When you were useful, you were worth keeping around. When you weren't," she shrugged. "At least he didn't just leave you for the wolves." "Might have been kinder." "Maybe." She pulled a piece of hardtack from her pocket, broke it in half, and handed him the larger piece. "But then you wouldn't be here, and I'd still be looking for someone who knows these mountains like I need them known." "What exactly do you need?" He chewed the hardtack slowly, making it last. "Patience, Mr. Walker. We're not there yet." She checked the ropes holding his legs, tightened one that had loosened during the ride. Her hands were quick and impersonal as a doctor's, but he noticed the calluses, the old scars across her knuckles, the way she handled the knots like a woman who'd tied down plenty of loads in her time. "You're not from around here," he observed. "Neither are you." I asked first. That got him another almost smile. "Missouri, originally, but that was a long time and several territories ago." She swung back onto her mare. "Ready?" The trail grew steeper after the creek, switchbacks carved into the mountainside by game and prospectors, wide enough for a horse but not much more. Talon found himself grateful for the ropes. Without them, he'd have slid right off the paint's rump on the steeper sections. His legs were dead weight, pulling him off balance with every shift of the horse's gait. Willow rode ahead but kept checking back, watching him with those sharp green eyes. Not with pity, he'd have hated that, but with the practical concern of someone protecting an investment. "You said Marcus tried for 3 months. He called ahead during one of the easier stretches. "Why'd you wait so long?" "Wasn't sure I needed a scout until recently. Circumstances changed." "What circumstances?" She didn't answer, just pointed to a hawk circling overhead, the same kind he'd watched at the trading post. Or maybe its mate. They hunted in pairs sometimes, one flushing prey while the other waited to strike. The sun climbed toward noon, and with it the temperature. Even in early October, the high country could swing from frost to sweat in a matter of hours. Willow shed her leather coat, revealing a man's cotton shirt underneath, sweat-stained and patched but clean. A leather cord around her neck disappeared beneath the collar, whatever hung from it hidden from view. They met no one else on the trail, which struck Talon as deliberate. This wasn't the main route to anywhere, just a deer track that most folks would pass by without noticing. The kind of trail a person would take if they didn't want to be followed. "You expecting trouble?" he asked when they paused again to rest the horses. "Always." She scanned the ridgeline above them, then the valley below. "Man I used to know taught me that. Said the only time you're safe is when you're expecting not to be." Smart man. He was. Something in how she said it suggested the past tense was permanent. "Also taught me that information is worth more than gold, if you know how to use it." "Is that what you bought information?" "Among other things." She produced an apple from somewhere, cut it in half with a knife that appeared and disappeared so fast he barely saw it. His half was already in his hand before he could react. "Tell me, Mr. Walker, what do you know about mineral rights in the Colorado Territory?" "Enough to know they're worth killing for." And have you killed for them? No, but I've tracked men who have found what was left of them. Mostly. She nodded, like that confirmed something. And the Consolidated Mining Company. What do you know about them? Now that was a name to conjure bad dreams with. Consolidated had fingers in half the strikes from Denver to California. And they didn't get them by playing fair. I know to stay clear of their operations. They've got lawyers in Denver, guns in the field, and politicians in their pockets. All true. She finished her apple half, tossed the core where the horses could reach it. They also murdered my husband. The words dropped between them like stones in still water. Talon waited, knowing there'd be more. 2 years ago come November, she continued, voice steady as her hands on the reins. James was a geologist, educated back east, brilliant with rocks and minerals, hopeless with people. Never could see a snake until it bit him. Consolidated was the snake. The whole den. She clicked her tongue and they started moving again. He found something up here, something big, spent weeks surveying, mapping, taking samples. Was going to file the claim proper, do everything legal and right. That was James believed in the law like some folks believe in God. The trail wound through a stand of lodgepole pines, their shadows falling across them in bars of light and dark. Talon could feel the old instincts stirring, reading the forest even from horseback. No one had passed this way recently, but someone had, maybe a week ago. The bent branches and scuffed bark told their own story. They came at night. Willow went on. 6 men, maybe 7. I was down in Bent Creek getting supplies. By the time I got back, she touched whatever hung from the cord around her neck. They made it look like claim jumpers, random violence. But they took his maps, his samples, everything except one thing. What? His backup notes, the ones I helped him hide because I didn't trust the world as much as he did. Now she turned in her saddle to look at him, full on. I've got a complete survey of mineral deposits that Consolidated killed for but doesn't know exists. What I don't have is someone who can help me understand the terrain those notes describe. Someone who knows every creek and ridge by heart, who could look at James's descriptions and tell me exactly where to dig. And you think that's worth $40? I think it's worth a lot more than $40. Question is whether you think so too. Talon considered. A paralyzed scout helping a widow take on the most powerful mining company in the territory. It sounded like the kind of foolishness that got people buried in unmarked graves. What makes you think I'd help you even if I could? Because you're angry. She turned back to the trail. I can see it burning in you like a banked fire. Angry at that bear for taking your legs. Angry at Marcus for selling you. Angry at those men for laughing. But mostly angry at yourself for ending up helpless. Each word hit true as a well-aimed arrow. I'm offering you a chance to matter again, she continued. To use what's in your head for something more than keeping ledgers or entertaining drunks. Help me find what James died for, and we split whatever comes of it. 60-40, my favor since I'm putting up the resources. And if Consolidated finds out, then we'd better make sure they don't. She pointed ahead where the trail crested a ridge. My place is just over that rise. You can see it and decide, if you want out, I'll take you back down to Bent Creek tomorrow. No hard feelings. But something tells me you won't. You sound mighty sure for a woman who just met me. I'm sure about what I see. A man who kept his mother's medicine pouch through everything, who speaks 4 languages and writes better than most, who held on to his pride even while being sold like livestock. She paused at the ridge line. That's not a man who gives up easy. They topped the rise, and Talon saw what Willow Steel called home. It wasn't what he'd expected. The cabin sat tucked into a fold of the mountain like it had grown there, built from logs so carefully fitted they didn't need chinking. The roof was sod-covered, nearly invisible from above, and the whole structure backed up against a cliff face that provided natural protection on one side. Gun ports were cut at strategic angles, and he counted at least 3 different escape routes just from what he could see. You built this? James designed it. I built it. Took most of a year after he died. She led the way down the slope. Like it. It's a fortress. That's the idea. As they got closer, he saw other touches. The garden plot surrounded by a fence tall enough to discourage deer and elk. The spring-fed stream diverted to run past the door. The stable built into the hillside, invisible until you were almost on top of it. Everything about the place spoke of planning, patience, and a woman preparing for war. "Last chance," she said as they reached the door. "Stay and help me, or go back to town tomorrow. But decide now, because once you know what I know, there's no walking away clean." Talon looked at the fortress cabin, at the woman who'd built it with her own hands, at the mountains rising all around them like walls against the world. He thought about Marcus selling him for $15, about the laughter of strangers, about the bear that had taken half his life and left him with the bitter remainder. 60-40's not enough, he said. "If I'm risking Consolidated's guns, I want half." Willow Steele smiled then, a real smile that changed her whole face. "Now you're talking like a partner. 50-50 it is. Mr. Walker, welcome to the war." She dismounted and began untying his legs. And for the first time in 6 months, Talon Walker felt something besides anger and shame. It might have been hope, it might have been purpose, or it might have been the simple relief of mattering to someone again, even if that someone was a crazy woman planning to take on the most dangerous mining outfit in the territory. Whatever it was, it felt better than being sold for pocket change at a trading post. And that, he figured, was enough to start with. Getting Talon from the horse to the cabin proved harder than either of them expected. Without working legs, his weight became unwieldy, and pride made him resist being carried like a sack of grain. Finally, Willow rigged a travois from 2 sturdy branches and a blanket, dragging him to the door with the same practical efficiency she'd shown all day. "Tomorrow, I'll work out something better," she said, helping him transfer to a rough-hewn chair near the stone fireplace. "Maybe a wheeled chair. Saw one once in Denver. Don't trouble yourself on my account. It's not trouble if it makes you more useful." She moved around the cabin's single room, lighting lamps against the gathering dusk. "Hungry?" Without waiting for an answer, she pulled down a ham from the rafters and began slicing. The cabin's interior revealed itself in the lamplight, sparse but organized. Everything in its place. A narrow bed in one corner. A larger pallet by the fire that she was apparently setting up for him. Shelves lined with preserve jars, ammunition, books, and on a table by the window, spread out like holy relics, papers covered in neat handwriting and careful diagrams. "James's notes?" Talon asked. She nodded, bringing him a plate of ham, cold biscuits, and pickled vegetables. 2 years I've been studying them, learning the symbols and measurements. I can read them now, understand what he found. What I can't do is match his descriptions to actual places. That's where you come in." While they ate, she brought the papers over, handling them like spun glass. "See here, crystalline formation at the source of the 3rd tributary north of Eagle's Cry. Do you know where that is?" Talon studied the notation, his mind automatically mapping the territory. Eagle's Cry, that's what the UTs call the peak above Wolverine Pass. The one that looks like a bird's head when the snow melts just right. 3rd tributary north would be... He closed his eyes, visualizing. Columbine Creek feeds into the Blue River about 8 miles downstream from the pass. "You're certain?" "I wintered near there 4 years ago. Trapped beaver until the streams froze solid." He traced the route on the paper without touching it. "Your husband found silver." "Silver. Yes. But also something else. Something Consolidated wanted enough to kill for." She pulled out another page. This one, covered in chemical formulas that meant nothing to Talon. James believed he'd found a new type of ore, something that occurred alongside the silver. He sent samples to a colleague back east, described it as potentially more valuable than gold. "What happened to the colleague?" "Dead. Train accident. They said 2 weeks after James was murdered." Her voice stayed level, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the paper. Consolidated is thorough, and you still want to take them on. I want what's mine by rights. What James died finding. She gathered the papers, returned them to their place. But first, we need to prepare. That claim has to be filed properly, which means surveying the exact boundaries, marking corners, recording everything legal and proper. Consolidated will know the minute you file. Let them. By then, we'll be dug in proper. This cabin's just the beginning. I've been stockpiling supplies, ammunition, everything we'd need for a siege. Talon shifted in the chair, his dead legs already aching in that phantom way they did when weather was changing. You talk like you're expecting a war. I am. She banked the fire for the night. Movements automatic from long practice. Question is whether you're willing to fight it with me. Not much of a fighter anymore. Your legs don't work. Your brain does. Your eyes do. Your hands do. She gestured at the gun ports cut into the walls. Man who can't run has to be twice as good at planning, twice as smart about defense. I need that kind of thinking. She helped him transfer to the pallet by the fire, matter of fact about the awkward business of moving dead weight. Her hands stayed impersonal, but he noticed she was careful not to cause pain, checking that his legs were positioned so they wouldn't cramp in the night. There's a chamber pot under the bed, she said quietly. I'll help if needed, but I figured you'd want to manage what you can yourself. I can manage. Good. We'll work out the rest as we go. She moved to her own bed, began unlacing her boots. Oh, and Mr. Walker, that Winchester hanging by the door is loaded. So's the Colt on the table. If something comes calling in the night, you defend this place like it's yours, because half of it is. Just like that. Just like that. I told you information's worth more than gold. What you've got in your head might be the difference between winning and dying. That makes you valuable. Legs or no legs. She blew out the lamp, and darkness settled over the cabin like a blanket. Outside, wind moved through the pines with a sound like whispers. An owl called somewhere up the ridge, and another answered from across the valley. Normal night sounds. But Talon found himself listening with the old alertness, cataloging and categorizing out of habit. You don't snore, do you? Willow's voice came from the darkness. Don't know. Never had anyone around to tell me. Well, if you do, I'll throw a boot at you. Despite everything, the pain, the strangeness, the uncertain future, Talon found himself almost smiling. Fair enough. He lay in the darkness, feeling the heat from the banked fire warm his face. His legs were dead below the waist, but the rest of him was very much alive and beginning to remember it. Tomorrow they'd start the real work. Tomorrow he'd have to prove his worth with maps and memory instead of footwork and tracking. Tomorrow the war Willow Steel had been planning would gain its second soldier. But tonight, for the first time in months, he wasn't alone, wasn't a burden or a curiosity or a piece of damaged goods for sale. He was a partner in something dangerous and probably foolish, but something that mattered. The fire crackled, settling into coals. Wind rattled the shutters, and somewhere in the darkness, Willow Steel breathed steady and even, standing her watch even in sleep. Willow, he called softly. That wheeled chair you mentioned, make sure it's sturdy enough to hold a rifle steady. He could hear the smile in her voice. Now you're thinking like a fortress man. Morning came gray and cold, with frost silvering the grass outside the cabin. Talon woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and the sight of Willow already dressed and armed, studying the terrain through a gun port. Trouble? He asked. Not yet, but there's fresh horse sign on the ridge trail. Someone's been scouting. She brought him coffee, black and strong enough to float a horseshoe. Could be hunters, could be prospectors, could be Consolidated already knows I bought myself a Nootka scout. How would they know? Same way I knew Marcus was selling. Money talks, but it also listens. She helped him sit up, then surprised him by producing a pair of crutches. Found these in Bent Creek last month. Figured they might come in handy. The crutches were rough but serviceable, carved from pine and padded with wrapped leather where they'd rest under his arms. With effort and her help, he managed to stand for the first time in weeks. His legs dangled useless, but his arms were still strong. "Let's see what you can do," she said. It took an hour of practice, falling, cursing, and trying again before he could move from the pallet to the table under his own power. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the morning chill. But by the time Willow called a halt, he'd managed to cross the cabin twice without falling. "Better than I expected," she said, and meant it. "Give it a week. You'll be moving around well enough. And then we start surveying. You tell me the landmarks from James's notes. I scout them out. We begin mapping the actual claim." She spread the papers out again. "But first, we need to know everything Consolidated knows, which means a trip to town for information. You're leaving just for 2 days. You'll be fine here. Food's plentiful, water's close, and you've got enough ammunition to hold off an army." She paused, then added more gently, "Unless you're not ready to be alone." Pride stiffened his spine. "I've been alone for months. 2 days is nothing." Good. But she spent the rest of the morning showing him where everything was stored, how the gun ports worked, the hidden cache of ammunition beneath the floorboards. If trouble comes, the protocol is simple. Shoot first, parley later. This high up, no one arrives by accident. By noon, she was ready to leave. The bay mare saddled and a pack mule loaded with trade goods to make her town visit look routine. She'd changed clothes too, wearing a dress over her trail clothes, looking almost like a normal frontier woman except for the way she moved and the calculating sharpness in her eyes. "Questions?" she asked from the doorway. "Just one. Why trust me? You don't know anything about me except I used to track for hire and now I can't walk. Could be I'll rob you blind the minute you're gone." "With what, your wheelchair?" She adjusted her hat, checking her hidden weapons one last time. "Besides, you're curious now. You want to know what James found as much as I want to claim it. That curiosity will keep you here better than any lock." She was right, and they both knew it. He watched from the window as she rode away, taking the main trail this time. Just another woman heading to town for supplies. When she was out of sight, he turned back to the papers on the table. Crystalline formations, tributary waters, chemical compositions he didn't understand but that men had died for. Outside, the wind picked up, bringing the smell of coming snow. Winter would arrive soon, making travel harder but also making the cabin more defensible. By spring, if they survived, they'd either be rich or dead. Talon reached for the crutches again, determined to master them before Willow returned. He had work to do, strengths to rebuild, a war to prepare for, and for the first time since the bear took his legs, he had a reason to fight it. The papers rustled in the breeze from under the door, covered in a dead man's careful handwriting. Somewhere out there, the thing James Steele had died for waited in the dark heart of the mountain, and Talon Walker, broken scout and unlikely partner, was going to help his widow claim it, even if it killed them both. Willow returned on the second evening as promised, riding hard with storm clouds chasing her up the mountain. Talon heard her coming the bay mare's particular gait, the pack mule's complaints, and had the door unbarred before she could call out. Trouble. He moved aside on his crutches, steadier now after 2 days of practice. Maybe. She led the animals quickly to the stable, her dress muddy and torn at the hem. "Help me get these supplies inside before the rain hits." They worked together with surprising efficiency. He couldn't carry much weight on the crutches, but he could direct and organize while she hauled. Salt pork, flour, ammunition, coffee, medical supplies enough to last a siege or a hard winter, whichever came first. "You bought heavy," he observed as she stacked the last crate. Town was full of talk. 3 Consolidated men arrived yesterday, asking questions about mineral scouts and claim maps. She peeled off the dress, revealing her trail clothes underneath. Marcus Henley was buying drinks and bragging about the crazy woman who paid $40 for a crippled Indian. He described you, down to the color of my hat, but that's not the worst part. She poured whiskey for them both, downing hers in one swallow. They've hired Luther Beckett? Talon's hand paused halfway to his mouth. Luther Beckett was a name that made honest men check their weapons and dishonest ones reconsider their life choices. Part tracker, part enforcer, all killer. He worked for whoever paid best and asked no questions about the work. You're sure? Saw him myself. That scarred face isn't easy to forget. She refilled her glass but didn't drink, just stared into the amber liquid. He was talking to the land office clerk when I passed by, probably checking recent filings, looking for patterns. He's good. Maybe the best tracker working these mountains now that... Talon stopped, realizing what he'd been about to say. Now that you can't walk, Willow finished for him. That's what I'm counting on. He knows these mountains, but not like you do. He can track what he sees, but you remember what was. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first fat drops of rain spattered against the windows. Willow moved around the cabin, checking shutters and gun ports, her movements sharp with nervous energy. There's something else, she said finally. In town, I heard talk about a new assay report from Denver. Seems someone found traces of that rare mineral James discovered. They're calling it columbium. Where? North of here, near the 10-mile range. Wrong direction entirely, but close enough to make Consolidated nervous. She finally sat, pulling off her boots. They know something's out here. They just don't know where. Yet. She looked at him across the table. How much progress did you make with the maps? He'd spent 2 days memorizing every line, every notation. Your husband was thorough. I can place about half his markers now, maybe more, but some of his descriptions are unusual. How so? He refers to landmarks I've never heard of. The Weeping Stone, Jacob's Ladder, the Devil's Pulpit. Either he was using names the locals don't, or he made them up. Code names. Willow pulled out a leather journal he hadn't seen before. I found this hidden in the stable wall last winter. More of James's notes, but in some kind of cipher. I've been trying to crack it, but... Talon examined the pages. Numbers and letters arranged in patterns that meant nothing at first glance. But there was something familiar about the rhythm of it, the way certain combinations repeated. It's not a cipher, he said slowly. It's Chinook jargon, written phonetically and mixed with English. You can read it. Maybe. Give me time. He pulled the journal closer, sounding out the strange combinations. Your husband was clever. No one around here would recognize trade language from the coast. They worked while the storm built outside, rain hammering the roof and wind testing every joint and shutter. Willow tended the fire and prepared a simple meal while Talon translated, calling out words and phrases as they came clear. Pia Chuck, that's firewater. Could mean hot springs, highest stone Klutchman, big stone woman, a rock formation that looks female. The Weeping Stone, Willow said suddenly. There's a place about 6 miles north where water seeps from a crack in a boulder, leaves mineral deposits that look like tears on a woman's face. James took me there once. That fits. And here Kliminawit stick Hugh, climbing stick many. Jacob's Ladder could be a series of switchbacks or maybe fallen trees forming a natural stairway. They pieced it together through the evening. Code names becoming real places, mysterious notations revealing themselves as landmark descriptions filtered through a coastal trade language no Colorado miner would know. By midnight, they decoded enough to understand the clever system James Steele had devised. He wasn't just recording locations, Talon said with growing respect. He was creating a maze only someone with specific knowledge could solve. Even if Consolidated found these notes, they'd be useless without a translator who knew both Chinook and these exact mountains. Or without a Nootka scout who'd lived in both worlds. Willow smiled grimly. No wonder he always insisted I learn about his work. He was making sure someone would survive who could read his code. The storm was directly overhead now, lightning illuminating the cabin in stark flashes. In one brilliant moment, Talon saw movement through the window, a shape that wasn't wind-bent trees or shifting shadows. "Company," he said quietly, reaching for the Winchester. Willow was already moving, dousing the lamps and taking position at a gun port. "How many?" "Not sure. Saw movement by the big pine." They waited in darkness, listening. Rain masked most sounds, but Talon's trained ear caught what didn't belong: the creak of wet leather, the occasional clink of metal on stone. Someone was definitely out there, probably more than one. "Could be they'll wait for the storm to pass," Willow whispered. A gunshot answered her, shattering the window and showering them with glass. Then more shots, muzzle flashes marking positions around the cabin. "So much for waiting," Talon muttered, returning fire through the broken window. The battle was brief but vicious. Their attackers had expected surprise and an easy fight. They found instead a fortified position defended by two people who knew their business. Willow's gun ports proved their worth, allowing her to fire from cover while Talon commanded the main window despite his crutches. "Moving left," Willow called out, and Talon swung his rifle to cover. Catching a running figure in the lightning flash, the man spun and fell, crawling for cover that wasn't there. More shots, more shouts. Someone tried the door and met a .44 slug for his trouble. Another made it to the woodpile before Willow's Winchester convinced him to reconsider. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shooting stopped. Talon counted heartbeats, waiting for the next rush that didn't come. Instead, a voice called from the darkness. "You, in the cabin. This is Luther Beckett. You've made your point. What do you say to talking terms?" "I say you can talk from out there," Willow called back. "State your business and be quick about it." "Fair enough, lady. You bought something in Bent Creek that belongs to my employers. They'd like it back." "I don't buy things that belong to others. Everything I own is mine by rights. Including the Indian. Including the partner who owns half this claim." Talon answered for himself. "Legal and binding. Filed in the land office 2 days ago." That brought silence. Willow shot him a look. They hadn't filed anything yet, but he shook his head slightly. "Let Beckett report that back to Consolidated. See how they like the idea of existing paperwork." "That's going to complicate things," Beckett finally said. "My employers don't like complications." "Then they should find simpler work," Willow suggested. "Now collect your wounded and get off my land before I forget my manners entirely." They heard movement in the darkness, groans and cursing as men helped wounded companions. Beckett's voice came once more. "This isn't over. You know that." "I'm counting on it," Willow replied. "Tell Consolidated they'll find me right here whenever they want to try again. But next time, bring more men." This was barely worth losing sleep over. The sounds faded into the storm, leaving only rain and wind and the settling of the cabin. They maintained their positions until dawn, when gray light revealed bloodstains leading away through the mud but no bodies. Beckett had taken all his men, living and dead. "Professional," Talon observed. "Doesn't leave evidence for the law. Also means we don't know how many we hit or how bad." Willow surveyed the damage: one broken window, bullet holes in the logs, scattered brass casings. "But we taught them something." "What's that?" "That a crippled scout and a crazy woman can hold this place." She turned to him, rain-wet and powder-stained but smiling, fierce. "That's worth more than $40 right there. Thought we were partners. 50-50. "So we are." She held out her hand, and he shook it, feeling the calluses and strength. "Welcome to the war. Talon Walker, it's officially begun." Outside, the storm was breaking apart, sunrise painting the peaks gold beneath the fleeing clouds. Somewhere down the mountain, Luther Beckett was making his report. Consolidated would respond, probably with more men and better tactics. But for now, the cabin stood solid, The partnership was sealed in gunpowder and trust, and James Steele's coded legacy waited to be fully decoded. They had provisions, ammunition, and the kind of mutual respect that only came from fighting side by side. It wasn't much against the power of consolidated mining, but it was a start. The weeks following Beckett's attack fell into a rhythm of preparation and vigilance. Talon grew stronger on the crutches, able to move around the cabin and even venture short distances outside. Willow made improvements to their defense's deeper trenches, better firing positions, a hidden cache of weapons in the stable. But the real work happened at the table, where James Steele's coded notes slowly gave up their secrets. "Look at this," Talon said one morning, comparing the decoded journal to a territorial map. "Your husband wasn't just recording one location. He found a vein that runs for miles, following the geological formation he called the Serpent's Backbone." Willow leaned over his shoulder, close enough that he caught the scent of wood smoke and lye soap in her hair. That would explain why Consolidated is so desperate. Not just one mine, but potentially dozens. All legally claimable by whoever files first with accurate boundaries. He traced the route with his finger. But there's a problem. Some of these markers are on Ute hunting grounds, sacred sites, from what he describes. James mentioned that, said he'd spoken with their elders, made some kind of arrangement. She pulled out another paper, this one bearing what looked like pictographs alongside English notes. He was learning their stories, trying to understand why certain places mattered. Smart man. Consolidated wouldn't care about sacred sites, but they'd care about Ute war parties. Talon studied the pictographs, recognizing some symbols from his own coastal people's writing. Did he say which band he spoke with? Chief Ure's people, mostly, but also someone named Joseph Colero. Talon sat back sharply. "Colero's no friend to whites. If your husband made a deal with him, there had to be something significant in trade, or a shared enemy." Willow moved to the stove, pouring coffee that had gone thick as tar. Consolidated pushed the UTs off their traditional wintering grounds 2 years back, claimed mineral rights superseded treaty obligations. "The enemy of my enemy," Talon murmured. He'd seen such alliances before, temporary things that lasted only as long as the shared threat. "We should reach out to them, carefully. You know their language." "Enough. More importantly, I know their ways. A paralyzed man approaching peacefully might get a hearing where an armed party wouldn't." Willow was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the morning mist. "I won't risk you like that. Not your risk to refuse. I'm half owner in this venture. Remember? Ownership doesn't mean much if you're dead." "Neither does hiding in this cabin until Consolidated brings an army." He struggled to his feet, needing to make this point standing. "Willow, we can't win this alone. Your husband knew that. It's why he was building bridges with the UTs." She turned to face him, and he saw something raw in her expression before she masked it. James thought he was safe too, thought talking and treaties and doing things proper would protect him. "I'm not James." "No," she said quietly. "You're not." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Willow shook herself, becoming all business again. "If we do this, we do it smart. Scout the meeting ground first, have backup plans, take no chances, we don't have to." She pulled down a newer rifle from the rack. "And you learn to shoot from horseback. A man who can't run had better be deadly accurate while mounted." They spent 3 days preparing. Talon practiced shooting while tied into the saddle, relearning balance and aim without the use of his legs. Willow scouted the route to known Ute camps, leaving sign that she sought peaceful contact. On the 4th morning, they found an answer, 3 eagle feathers tied with red thread, left on their doorstep. "Invitation," Talon interpreted. "Safe passage for talking." "Or a trap." "Possible, but Colero's not known for tricks. When he wants you dead, you know it straight." They rode out at dawn, taking a pack horse loaded with trade goods, ammunition, tobacco, coffee, things precious in the high country. Talon had to be tied into his saddle, but Willow had rigged the ropes so he could release them quickly if needed. His rifle rode across the saddle bow, loaded and ready. The meeting place was a meadow below tree line, neutral ground where both sides could see approaching danger. They arrived to find 5 Ute warriors waiting, with Joseph Colorado himself in the center. He was smaller than Talon expected, but his eyes held the hardness of a man who'd survived too much to trust easily. "I know you," Colorado said in English, studying Talon. "The Nootka who rode with Tom Jeffers's outfit. You found my nephew when he was lost in the blizzard 3 winters back." "I remember. Strong boy. Lived through a night that would have killed grown men." "He speaks of you still." Colorado's gaze shifted to Willow. "This is the woman who builds like a man who held off Beckett's dogs." "News travels fast," Willow observed. "Everything travels in these mountains. Wind, water, word." The chief gestured for them to dismount. "Come, we talk." They sat in a circle on blankets, sharing tobacco while the warriors watched from a respectful distance. Colorado listened without interrupting as Talon explained their situation, translating for Willow when needed. "Your man Steele, he came to us," Colorado said finally. "Showed respect, asked permission. We told him the sacred places, where not to dig. He listened, marked his maps to avoid those sites. We'll honor those marks," Willow promised. "Perhaps, but you are one woman and one broken man. Consolidated is many, and they honor nothing." He was quiet, smoking thoughtfully. "Steele promised something else. Said if he found the riches in the stone, he would share, not just gold, but protection. Legal papers saying the sacred sites could never be mined." "I don't understand," Willow said, but Talon did. Mining claims can be written many ways. Include some land for extraction, exclude others for technical reasons. Create a paper wall around places that matter. Smart Nootka. Colorado almost smiled. Steele understood. Take some land. Protect the rest. Better than losing all to those who care nothing for the spirits in the stones. "We'll honor that too," Willow said. "James's promises are my promises." "Words." Colorado waved dismissively. "Consolidated speaks words too, then brings guns." "Then what do you want?" The chief looked at Talon. "You vouch for this woman, your life on her word." Talon didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Then we help. Not fight your war, this is white man's business. But watch, carry word. Make sure Consolidated doesn't surprise you like they surprised Steele." "Early warning," Willow breathed. "That could make all the difference." "More than that." Colorado gestured, and one of his warriors brought forward a wrapped bundle. "Steele left this with us. Said if something happened, give it to whoever came with his words and honored his promises." Willow's hands shook as she unwrapped the bundle. Inside were more papers, but also rock samples, each carefully labeled. And at the bottom, a legal document, a properly filed mining claim, dated 2 days before James's death. "He filed it after all," she whispered. Under another name, Talon read, "The Serpent's Rest Mining Company, Willow. This is legal proof, dated and stamped." "Consolidated killed him thinking he hadn't filed yet," she said wonderingly. "They've been searching for papers that were never there." "Your enemies are strong," Colorado said, "but perhaps not as clever as they think. This gives you weapons their guns can't fight legal ones." They concluded the meeting with formal promises. The Utes would watch the approaches to Willow's land, sending warning of any large parties. In return, she would honor James's promises about the sacred sites and share any mineral wealth according to his original terms. It wasn't an alliance exactly, but it was something almost as valuable mutual benefit based on mutual respect. Riding home, Willow was quiet until they were well away from the meadow. Then she said, "He trusted you immediately." "Why?" "That nephew I found, he wasn't just lost. He'd fallen through ice, was near frozen when I pulled him out. Spent 2 days warming him, feeding him, getting him home safe. Could have left him. I was tracking a man worth good money. But you didn't. No, some things matter more than money. He adjusted his position in the saddle, fighting the constant ache. Colorado remembers. To the Utes. A life debt carries forward. He couldn't fully trust you, but he could trust me to judge you. And you did, without hesitation. You hauled a broken scout up a mountain and made him a partner instead of a servant. That tells me what I need to know. She was quiet again until they reached a stream where they stopped to water the horses. While he stayed mounted, she filled their canteens, and he saw her slip something from around her neck, a locket on that leather cord. "James gave me this on our wedding day," she said, not looking at him. "Told me I was his whole world, that everything he did was for us, for the family we'd have someday." She opened it, showing a small photograph of a younger man with gentle eyes and a scholar's soft hands. "I used to talk to him every night, tell him about my day, my plans, how I was going to make consolidated pay. Used to." She clicked the locket shut but didn't put it back on. "Lately, I've been too busy living to talk to the dead. Is that wrong?" I think James would understand. He sounded like a man who valued life over grief. He was. She tucked the locket in her pocket instead of wearing it. "We should ride. Want to be home before dark." They made good time despite Talon's limitations, reaching the cabin as shadows stretched long across the meadow. But something was wrong. The door stood slightly open, and fresh boot prints marked the ground. "Stay here," Willow ordered, dismounting with her rifle ready. Like hell. They approached together, Talon covering her from horseback while she pushed the door wide. The cabin had been searched carefully, professionally. Nothing destroyed, but everything examined. James's papers were scattered across the table, and the floorboard hiding the ammunition cache had been pried up. On the table, weighted down with a rock, was a note. "Mrs. Steele, your legal claim has been reviewed. Consolidated Mining acknowledges your ownership of the filed areas. However, we believe there are additional documents vital to proper boundary determination. We propose a meeting to discuss mutual benefit. If interested, hang a white cloth from your door. We will see it. Luther Beckett, Representative. Consolidated Mining Company." "They know about the claim," Willow said grimly. "But not the full boundaries. Not the coded locations." Talon maneuvered through the door, checking for traps or unwelcome surprises. "This feels like desperation disguised as diplomacy. Should we meet with them?" "Your choice. But now we know they need us alive, at least until they get what they want." He picked up one of James's scattered papers. "Question is, what do we need?" Willow stood in the doorway of her violated home, watching the last light fade from the peaks. When she spoke, her voice carried new steel. "Time. We need time to properly file the full claims, to get the boundaries legally recorded, to make it ironclad. Then we meet, but on our terms." She turned to him, and in the fading light he saw not the grief-stricken widow who'd bought him, but a woman forged by loss into something harder and more dangerous. "Partners?" she asked. "Partners," he confirmed. Tomorrow they'd hang out a white cloth and begin a different kind of war, one fought with papers and promises instead of bullets. But tonight, they had work to do, claims to prepare, and a dead man's legacy to protect. The game was changing, but the stakes remained the same, everything they had against everything Consolidated wanted. And somewhere in the darkness between them grew something neither had expected: trust deeper than partnership, connection stronger than shared danger. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the ground love might grow in, if they lived long enough to tend it. The miners arrived as promised, but with them came trouble. Tom Brennan's crew had barely set up camp at the first mine site when the Pinkertons appeared, 3 men in city suits who looked as out of place in the mountains as fish in a desert. Their leader, a thin man named Harrison Price, presented his credentials to Willow with theatrical politeness. We're investigating certain irregularities in your late husband's affairs, Price said, his smile never reaching his eyes. We'll need access to all his papers, journals, and correspondence. Do you have a warrant? Willow stood in the cabin doorway, blocking entrance. We're private investigators, Mrs. Steele. We don't need warrants, just cooperation. Of course, failure to cooperate could be seen as consciousness of guilt. And breaking into private property could be seen as trespassing, Talon said from behind her, his rifle visible across his lap. Colorado law's real clear on that. Price's eyes narrowed. Mr. Walker, we've heard about you. Tragic. What happened? Must be difficult, depending on Mrs. Steele's charity. I depend on no one's charity, Talon said evenly. I'm co-owner of these claims, legal partner, which means you need both our permissions to search anything, which you won't get without a warrant, Willow added. The Pinkertons' polite mask slipped slightly. This can be easy or hard. Folks, we're just seeking the truth about James Steele's death. So are we, Willow said. When you find his real killers at Consolidated, let us know. They stared at each other for a long moment before Price touched his hat. We'll be around, Mrs. Steele, watching, investigating. The truth has a way of surfacing. After they left, Willow sank into a chair. They'll dig into everything, talk to everyone. Let them, Talon said. We've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide. She rubbed her temples. I need to warn Brennan. If the Pinkertons pressure his men... A commotion outside interrupted her. Shouts, the sound of horses, then Brennan himself bursting through the door. We've struck it, he gasped, face flushed with excitement. Just where you said, following that quartz vein, richest ore I've ever seen. Willow and Talon exchanged glances. Success brought its own dangers. How much? Talon asked. First assay shows 4,000 to the ton, maybe more. Brennan couldn't stop grinning. At this rate, we'll need armed guards just to transport it to the smelter. We'll need guards for more than that, Willow said. Consolidated won't sit idle while we pull fortune from the ground. She was right. Within days, the mountain became a battlefield of a different sort. Consolidated men accidentally blocked the road to the smelter. Supplies ordered by Willow mysteriously disappeared. 2 of Brennan's miners were arrested on trumped-up charges, though Marshal Dutton released them quickly. Through it all, the Pinkertons watched and questioned, building their case with the patience of spiders spinning a web. They found the widow who'd seen strangers the night James died, but she suddenly couldn't remember details. They located the doctor who'd treated gunshot wounds, but he'd developed convenient amnesia. They're being thorough, Dutton told Willow during one of her trips to town. But so am I. Interesting thing, every witness who might help you has either disappeared or changed their story. That suggests something. That Consolidated owns this territory. That someone's working very hard to hide the truth. He leaned back in his chair. I've sent inquiries east. If your husband really did send ore samples to a colleague who then died mysteriously, there'll be records. Thank you, Willow said, surprised by his diligence. Don't thank me yet. If I find evidence you killed your husband, I'll arrest you just as quick. But his tone suggested he didn't expect to find such evidence. Back at the mine, production increased daily. The ore was even richer, deeper in validating James's careful surveys. But success brought new problems. They needed more men, more equipment, better security. And all of it required money they wouldn't have until the first ore payments came through. We could take a loan, Talon suggested one evening as they reviewed accounts. From whom every bank in the territory has consolidated connections. Willow threw down her pencil in frustration. We're pulling fortune from the ground, but might go broke doing it. A knock interrupted them. Brennan entered, followed by someone unexpected, Joseph Colorado. Chief, Talon said, surprised. What brings you here? Business. Colorado sat without invitation. My people have been watching, as promised. But watching doesn't fill bellies or buy ammunition for winter. You want payment, Willow said. I want partnership. The agreement with your husband, percentage of profits for protection of sacred sites. We've upheld our end. Of course. Willow pulled out the original agreement. 10% of net profits, paid quarterly. Paid monthly, Colorado corrected. Times are hard. Consolidated squeezes everyone, not just you. Monthly it is. Willow extended her hand, and after a moment, Colorado shook it. But Chief, we won't have profits to share until you can move your ore safely to market. He smiled. Which is why my warriors will escort your shipments. For our mutual benefit. Talon translated the subtext Ute warriors protecting ore wagons would make even Consolidated think twice about interference. Clever, Price said from the doorway, having entered uninvited. Using Indians to guard your stolen wealth. Nothing stolen about it, Willow said coldly. And you're trespassing, again. Just happened to be passing when I heard mention of profit-sharing agreements. The Pinkertons' eyes glittered. Interesting how many deals you're making. Misses, steal. Almost like you're trying to buy protection. Or paying fair wages to honest partners. Talon said. Partners. Price tasted the word. Yes, you two have become quite close. Some might say suspiciously close. A grieving widow and the convenient scout who helped her decode her husband's secret notes. Almost like it was planned. The implication hung heavy in the air. Before anyone could respond, another voice spoke from outside. That's enough. Price. Luther Beckett entered, looking trail-worn but dangerous as ever. Consolidated sent me to call you off. You're overplaying the hand. I work for whoever pays me, Price said stiffly. And Consolidated's decided your services are no longer required. Beckett's hand rested on his gun. Collect your men and get out. The two predators faced each other while everyone else held their breath. Finally, Price backed down. This isn't over, he told Willow. The truth always comes out. After he left, Beckett turned to the others. Don't look so surprised. Bad for business if Pinkertons start a war in these mountains. Consolidated wants to negotiate again. Same answer as before. Willow said. Different terms this time. He pulled out a document. Full recognition of your claims. Fair market price for all ore. No interference with operations. All they want is right of first refusal if you ever sell. Talon read through it quickly. This is actually reasonable. Too reasonable, Willow said suspiciously. What's the catch? No catch. Turns out fighting you is costing more than buying from you would. Bad business. Beckett shrugged. Plus, word is Federal Marshal Dutton's been asking uncomfortable questions about that night 2 years ago. Some executives think it's better to make peace before he finds answers. They're scared. Talon realized. Dutton's getting close to something. Maybe. Or maybe they just recognize a stalemate. Beckett stood. Think about it. Offer stands for 3 days. After he left, the cabin erupted in discussion. Colorado argued for accepting peace meant prosperity for everyone. Brennan worried about hidden traps in the agreement. Willow stayed silent, staring at the document. What do you think? She finally asked Talon when they were alone. I think James would want you to be safe, to live without looking over your shoulder. That's not what I asked. He met her eyes. I think Consolidated killed James and they should pay for it. But I also think living well might be the best revenge. And us? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What happens to us if there's no war to fight? Willow. He reached out, and she took his hand. This was never about the war. Not for me. Not anymore. She squeezed his fingers. For me either. Somewhere between buying you and fighting beside you. I stopped thinking about James every minute. Started thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Is that wrong? I think James would understand. He loved you enough to protect you even after death. He'd want you happy. And you, what do you want? The answer came without thought. To stay, to be your partner in whatever comes next, to matter to someone who matters to me. You matter? She said softly. More than I expected, more than I was ready for. They sat in silence, hands linked, contemplating a future neither had imagined. Outside, the mine operated in full swing. Ore wagons preparing for their guarded journey to town. The war that had brought them together was ending. But something else was beginning. A knock broke the moment. Brennan stuck his head in. "Mrs. Steel Marshal Dutton just rode up. Says it's urgent." Dutton entered looking grim, but satisfied. "Thought you should know. I found James's colleague back east. He faked his death to hide from Consolidated. Still had the ore samples and correspondence. His testimony, combined with other evidence, is enough to bring charges against several Consolidated executives for conspiracy to commit murder." Willow sagged against Talon. "It's really over. The legal battles are just beginning, but yes, the truth is out." Dutton touched his hat. "Your husband was a good man, Mrs. Steele. He deserves justice." "He deserves to be alive," she said quietly. "But justice will have to do." After Dutton left, Willow made her decision. "We'll take Consolidated Steel, end the fighting, build something lasting." "Together?" Talon asked. Together. That night, as snow began to fall earnestly, they signed the agreement that ended their war with Consolidated. The company would buy their ore at fair prices. The claims would remain theirs, and the shadow of threat would lift from their lives. But the real victory sat beside the fire afterward, two unlikely partners who'd found each other through loss and conflict, now facing a future of their own making. Willow pulled out James's picture one last time, studied it, then placed it gently in the fire. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing me here." Talon took her hand again, and they watched the photograph curl and disappear. The past was honored but released. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: running a mine, building a life, creating something from nothing but determination and trust. "No regrets?" Talon asked. "None." Willow leaned against his shoulder. "You—" "Only that it took a bear and a trading post to bring us together." She laughed, the first truly free laugh he'd heard from her. "Maybe that's what it took, two broken people making each other whole." "Is that what we are?" "That's what we were," she corrected. Now we're partners, in every way that matters." The fire burned low. Snow whispered against windows. And in a cabin built for war, two people discovered peace. The Serpent's Rest mine would make them wealthy, but they'd already found something worth more than gold, a reason to face tomorrow together. In the mountains of Colorado, where fortunes were made and lost daily, Willow Steele and Talon Walker had discovered the rarest treasure of all, a love forged in hardship, tested by fire, and strong enough to last a lifetime. The crippled scout and the determined widow had become something neither expected home to each other. Thank you for listening to our story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts with us.